Good evening and welcome to the Smart Entrepreneurship Decoded on Transcontinental Times. Nothing frustrates an entrepreneur more than receiving solace from so-called mentors rather than the solutions they have gone for. And nothing frustrates an investor more than the fact that when they have agreed to make an investment, they find the entrepreneur's company to be not ready for investment. If you read about the most successful reality show on television from America, you will also read that out of thousands of people who apply, a few hundred who get shortlisted, a few dozen who get coached, ultimately a handful make it to each episode. Out of that handful of 5 or 6, 1, maybe 2 get a deal. You will be surprised to know that even on that world famous reality show, out of every 2 deals, 1 fails due diligence and the money never reaches the entrepreneur. My experience is the same in our funding platform, India Fund Fest, where I play deal master along with a co-deal master who's our guest tonight. Very frustrating. Despite all the coaching, everything you tell entrepreneurs, they set up their companies and they bypass every law, every accounting norm, every best practice, every governance thing that you tell them about, and they still expect to be funded by a complete stranger who doesn't know them at all. So what should you do? Obviously, you need advice. Obviously, you need to get investor ready. But who should you go to? If you go to a traditional lawyer, chartered accountant, company secretary, cost accountant, etc., and there are a lot of them, and they are very accomplished and successful people, nothing against them, you're likely to be told what is wrong and what you are doing wrong after you have done it. So who do you go to for strategic advice so that you don't make those mistakes? The regular mentors cannot tell you that because this is a specialized area. You need to go to somebody who is probably a CA or a chartered accountant, company secretary, or a practicing lawyer. I mean practicing. But somebody who has set up a practice on their own so they know the pain of entrepreneurship. Not somebody who's inherited it or acquired it or it was granted to them in some way. Somebody who has a business sense for this. Somebody who's not living out of their past reputation, late age, and charging you monumental fees, whereas some clerk in the office is managing your account. Where and how do you find this somebody? Tonight, our guest is exactly that kind of person who set up a very, very successful law practice in India from Bangalore with offices in Singapore and expanding fast to other parts of the world, where he represents both sides in entrepreneurs and investors. And he has set up his practice as a first-generation lawyer himself. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Vijay Sambamurthi. Welcome, Vijay.
Thank you, Nalin.
Very few lawyers today have that much facial hair, and I know you don't normally keep it. It's probably a sign of the lockdown that now you have more hair on your face than your head. Very interesting. So you heard what I said in the opening, right? You have gone through the pain of entrepreneurship. You have set up a law practice knowing fully well that the real financial reward and the halo effect comes in the second or third generation. Very difficult to do it in the first generation. What I want to ask you is, why did you choose this path, which is tougher than taking a corporate law job and earning big bucks relatively earlier? And second, how was the journey?
Okay. Firstly, thank you, Nalin and Roshan and the Transcontinental Times team for having me here. And hello to everybody, and good evening, I think, if you're in Asia, and good morning if you're listening in from the western part of the world. Before I answer your question, Nalin, to respond quickly to your little joke about my facial hair, you got to use the lockdown for something. And, being an entrepreneur, I'm always looking at growth. So whether it's growth in my facial hair or growth in the business, I think they got to go hand in hand. Yeah. But thank you for the compliment. I hope the growth in the professional part of our show will be as good as what I've seen on my face. To answer your question, why did I take this path? I think I'll need to step back a little. So, firstly, it's not like I want to, correct this. It's not as if I got out of law school and straight away decided to start up my own law firm. I would have loved to because I've always wanted to, to use a very, very cliched expression. I've always wanted to be my own boss. But I'll talk about that later, where I discovered that you are never your own boss, even if you start up, because you're always, at some level or the other, working to make sure that somebody is delighted and somebody else is happy. And that's a good thing. I say that in a good way. But to come back to your question, like most people, I graduated from the National Law School of India, Bangalore in 1997. And like most people who graduated with me then, I went to work for a law firm. I started my career at one of India's oldest law firms called Mullah and Mullah at Craigie Blunt and Carrow. It was a firm from the British times, and it continues to be a very, very well-respected law firm. And I started my career there in Bombay. And after a few years there, I moved to another law firm called Nishit Desai Associates, which is also a highly respected and successful law firm. And at both those law firms, I learned a lot. Mr. E.A.K. Fazla Boy at Mullah and Mullah and Mr. Ravi Krishnamurthy as well were the partners I used to work closely with at Mullah and Mullah. And at Nishit Desai, of course, Mr. Nishit Desai was my mentor and boss. And, I learned a lot from, both organizations. But my desire to start something up on my own had been there in me from day one. If I had a choice, I would have started up straight out of law school. Technically, everybody has that choice. You could, but it's not a practical choice because, law is a profession where it's generally not a good idea to start up straight out of law school because you need to gain some experience because you are giving advice to somebody, and the more time you spend advising people, the better you get at it. And of course, as I've heard often people say, and I believe in it, that if you till you have made mistakes, you're not going to learn. And experience does come from others. So I spent a decade learning the ropes, if you will, under two of the best firms. And I, in this period, also identified my key practice area, which I wanted to focus on. I had been doing a lot of mixed work. And when I decided to, start up Lexogen around 2006, I was already heading the private equity practice at Nishit Desai. And I had also set up and was heading their infrastructure projects practice. So in some sense, my practice area and focus, or at least the core focus areas, were already chosen. And so in 2006, when I moved out and founded Lexogen, in the initial days, the focus of the firm was largely driven around my own specialization. So in the early years, say in the first 3 or 4 years, we actually only did large private equity deals. When I say large, it doesn't have to be very large, but we did not do a lot of early stage work at all. In fact, I would say a very, very large percentage of our work was late stage private equity, right? Now, why did I get into this and why did I want to do it? It was primarily driven by the entrepreneurial bug more than anything else. But it was also about, the fact that somewhere along the time that I was working in these two very good firms, I was doing very, even if I say so myself, I was doing reasonably well. I could have arguably continued along that path and could have quite possibly done financially very well as well. So there was no need from that perspective for me to quit and start up. It was not driven by financial aspects, but it was certainly driven by the fact that I wanted to build an organization that stood for certain values which I believe in and which I believed in then. And I said, if I want to run the organization shaped on what I want to see, then I should put my money where my mouth is. I should put my risk where my mouth is. And so I decided to start up. So that in a nutshell is the answer.
So, you made an important point. Probably there is no one answer for all industries, but how important is it for young people to actually work somewhere, acquire some degree of expertise before starting out on their own? Forget the financial side of it for a moment.
Sure.
Is that important? One. And secondly, are there industries where, say, gaming, etc., where it is not important? Anybody can start off from a garage. I mean, the garage stories are glorified a lot with Bill Gates, etc. But a garage in America is different from a garage in India and the third world. So how important is that knowledge piece? And should people do that? And are there industries where they can skip that learning or accelerate it?
No, that's a great question. And I think it's a tough one to, generalize an answer for every industry. Or even for every person. But it's fair to say that in a business like professional services, where the business depends on your acquisition of a certain level of practical knowledge. I mean, everybody goes to law school, everybody goes to engineering college, everybody goes to medical school, and they learn the technical aspects of, so obviously you go to good law schools or good med schools, they will fill you with all the knowledge that you need. But that's not at all, in my opinion, enough. It is very good. It's a very good start. I'm not certainly discounting the value of a good education. I have been the beneficiary and recipient of an excellent education and an excellent law school. So by no means am I going to, be dismissive of that. It has certainly helped me in a very, very big way. But that was the starting point. I cannot today, as a 24-year-old lawyer, still be saying, I went to national law school, so I need to be given this kind of respect. It doesn't work like that. That kind of entry advantage is given to you for a very short time. So in professional services, according to me, where your clients are relying on you for advice, I think it's extremely critical to spend your time learning the ropes and doing as diverse work as possible before you go out and start up. Because if you start up too early, you can make mistakes, and your mistakes are going to cost other people very severely. For example, if you're a doctor, if you're straight out of finishing MBBS and MD, you decide you want to set up practice. There's nothing wrong in that. You're entitled to practice, and you can practice. And same with being an advocate or a lawyer, right? Once I get my bar council registration, I can practice. But it's a big responsibility to advise people, whether it be to do with somebody's life and limb or liberty, or to do with somebody's life, or to do with somebody's property and finances. It's a big responsibility, and therefore you need to be ready.
So let's peel that part a little bit, because it's an important part. When it comes to money, and I'll come to the investor side later, but when it comes to money, and you are in the middle of that, right? People are trusting you, sometimes from both sides, to do the right thing for them, and there's a lot of money involved.
Absolutely.
When it comes to money, people like to work with people with credibility. It is your personal credibility on the line. It's your firm's credibility on the line. Yep. How do you build that trust? Simply saying I work with Mullah and Mullah or some other company doesn't work, right? I mean, so many people work there. Simply saying I have the knowledge doesn't work, because that deal that they're trying to engage you for is a binary event. If you fail, you fail. There is no, it's like death. There's no coming back. How do you generate that trust? How do you build that personal branding? Because it's important for entrepreneurs, not just in services field, but also when they deal with investors. They're trying to get kind of a speed dating for the trust. How do you do that? What has been your
So
experience?
that's a great question. And unfortunately, Nalin, my answer is going to be an extremely unsexy one, right? There is no shortcut to building trust. Trust takes years to acquire, right? Years in this kind of knowledge economy, especially, where people are relying on your advice to make their decisions, right? And like I said, it's not just for lawyers, it could be for doctors. People are relying on their advice and taking life and death decisions. Similarly, with lawyers, people and organizations, heads of governments, heads of local bodies are taking decisions based on this advice, and that trust doesn't come easily, and it has to be built over years and years of hard work. Now, whether it's when I say years and years, there's no some magic number to it. Some people earn that trust in as early as 5 years. Some people take 20 years to get there,
What
and
what
there's
did
nothing
you
wrong with
do? What did
so
you do?
I so I was I was very fortunate in some ways, and so were many of my peers who graduated from law school around the time that we did. So we graduated in the mid 90s. That was the onset of the liberalization era in India. In 1991, the government, privatized everything in limited levels, allowed foreign investment, and there was tons of uncharted territory. Lawyers with 20, 30 years of experience who were highly regarded back then had no experience in this law. So therefore, in a way, in a warped sort of a way, we found ourselves on par with lawyers who are with 10 years and 15 years of experience, and we were trying to grapple with the same set of legal issues. So, having started my career in a time like that, and started and worked in a couple of excellent firms, I had the good fortune to work on some great deals very, very early on in the country's history in terms of those deals. So, for example, 1998, I was barely a second year kid in the legal profession when Mr. Faisal Boy staffed me to work on the Indian oil disinvestment matter, which is like a huge, huge. It's not like I was leading that transaction, but I was doing a lot of hands-on work, which certainly a second-year associate today will not get, because back then there weren't enough of experienced people anyway. So everybody who showed the initiative and who showed the ability to work hard and who showed the commitment was given a chance. And anybody who grabbed that chance with both hands, I think went places. So I think I would be honest in saying I was very fortunate to have come out of law school at the right time and be the beneficiary of that liberalization wave. And fortunate again to have been trained under some very, very excellent mentors. And again, fortunate. Sorry?
There is a timing issue.
Absolutely. Timing
Just
matters.
for a moment, I'm going to take you in the same topic, little further. In a profession where you are not allowed to blatantly advertise, you can't put TV ads, you can't put full page ads, etc. How do you maintain that branding? How do you network? What do you do? Because there'll be important lessons for budding entrepreneurs there.
See, I think budding entrepreneurs from other industries may not necessarily need to be limited by these things because they have the ability to, publicize themselves as they feel like. And in the legal profession, we've always had restrictions on, advertising and soliciting business. And there is the Advocates Act, and there are standards of professional etiquette that are set by the Bar Council of India, to which all of us must, adhere to and abide by. So, what I will say is this: my personal view is that even if there was no bar on advertising, would most of us lawyers resort to, putting up a banner on Marine Drive? Probably not. That's not the model that works, right? I mean, you don't necessarily see many professional services firms adopting that model where they have to advertise. But I think networking is a very, very important part of any profession. And the legal profession is no exception. I think it's very important for us to meet people and to be seen and be visible and to talk about our work. So this is not about bragging or about advertising our wares, but people need to know how do you make a decision as a consumer who the good lawyers are? If you're not allowed to showcase the work that you've done, or if you're not allowed to have conferences where you're showcasing the work that you've done, which all law firms do these days. The law firm world as well has become very sophisticated, and the Bar Council and the regulators are aware of that. So while, of course, as a profession, most of us would shy away from blatant advertising. Like, we're not going to put up billboards in railway stations and airports. That kind of stuff is maybe going to happen down the line, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. But most of us, I think, agree, and I certainly agree, and I'm happy to say this on record, that I think it's very important for professionals to be able to network and to be able to talk about the work they've done. It's very important because otherwise consumers have no idea who are the good guys and who are not. Consumers are entitled. Clients are the consumers here. They're entitled to the information so that they can make the decision for themselves as to who the good lawyers are in which field.
Okay, so let's move the topic a little bit to something around investors, investment, entrepreneurs, etc. We have worked together on India Fund Fest, Northeast India Fund Fest. Those are different kind of deals, different size, different level of entrepreneurs. You also mainly deal with the large deals, international deals, international investors, etc.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for entrepreneurs, especially ones seeking first-time investment?
Sure.
How do they get investor ready from a governance and legal and statutory perspective? What are the things you've noticed they miss? What are the 2-3 things that they should take care of as base hygiene before they think of approaching an investor? I'm sure you have a lot of examples there, but tell us a few.
No, that's a great question, Nalin. And the first thing I will say by way of answer to that is that the first advice I would give entrepreneurs is that they should take governance and compliance and legal structuring and legal documentation as very important aspects and not just as a check the box. Many entrepreneurs, especially in India, make the mistake of thinking that having a lawyer is just a cost. It's a sort of an inconvenience because they're expected to have a lawyer look at it. Otherwise, they'll not get funded, etc. But I think it's way more than that. I think having a good lawyer and a good getting the right legal advice at the right time can be extremely important. In many cases, it has prevented entrepreneurs from having unpleasant fallouts amongst themselves, co-founder disputes, for example, or in others, it has helped entrepreneurs understand the regulatory issues and the impact of it, and the impact on valuation. Now, the minute you say it affects valuation, everybody sits up and takes notice in the entrepreneur community, right? So it goes a long way. Don't look at legal as an inconvenience. It is a necessity. Look at it as such. It's a necessity and a very important necessity. It can save you from real trouble, and it can also, on the good side, help you get a good deal, whether you're getting an investment or getting an exit. Yeah, so that's the first piece of advice I'll give entrepreneurs. Second piece of advice I will give is, if you are, having co-founders, right? Do not hesitate to have, very, very straight and candid talk about who's going to do what, who's going to own how much of the company. Now, just because you're friends and you're starting the company, everything doesn't have to be 50-50, right? I mean, these things have to be a function of who's going to lead which role and who's contributing what. So have honest conversations about those things. And whatever that you agree on, make sure you get a good lawyer to document it because many times misunderstandings happen because one co-founder thinks that the deal is A and the other co-founder genuinely thinks the deal is B, and there is some disconnect in how they've both heard what they wanted to hear. So very often, I think documenting these things makes a big difference. So document.
So that's, let's try to get it a little more specific. So for example, I keep giving this example. If I want to take a loan against an asset, I need to have at least 10-15% of my own money, right? Nobody's going to give me 100%, even though it's against an asset. Now, in entrepreneurship, we go and ask for money. Generally, there's no asset backing it other than your company's work, track record, projections, etc. What is the kind of percentage they should keep in mind as transaction cost for, say, a normal deal around $5-10 million? If it's too small, the percentage will be ridiculously high. If it's too high, the percentage will be much lower. But normally, what is the transaction cost they should keep in mind that they will need to pay out as a percentage of the amount raised?
So, the honest answer is the only cost that is a percentage of funds raised is the investment banking cost, right? The investment banker fee is usually a percentage of the deal size. So therefore, that's the only thing that works on a percentage basis. Other than that, be it accounting fees, be it legal fees, it is almost never on a percentage basis. But what happens is there are a couple of models of billings that are done by accounting firms and legal firms. So we generally use a time spent billing model for most of our work. But typically, for startups, that becomes very scary almost because, and I can completely empathize with that because I have been there. I have started up and I'm in the early days sweated about paying the bills and making sure the salaries are paid and making sure that I don't run out of cash with all my savings. So I completely empathize with that. So they have this reluctance to look at a time spent billing model. So it's almost a given that most startup funding deals of an early stage, the fees are typically agreed to as a fixed fee. But that is based on certain assumptions being met. Usual assumptions that we at Lexogen put in such cases to protect ourselves is we usually have a long stop date. So if the deal doesn't close for 4 months or 5 months, we will then say that we'll have to talk and renegotiate an additional fee. Or it could be that work has been really excessive, too much negotiation. Now, very often, the different firms take different approaches to deal with this. I don't want to speak for others in the industry. But speaking for ourselves, the approach we take is we have honest conversations with our clients before they become our clients. We tell them what we can do and what we cannot do. We are not cheap. We are not. Our USP is not price. And just because we are representing startups doesn't mean our pricing is dirt cheap. So that's the first thing that we set right. That don't come to us if you're looking for one of the cheapest firms in the country, because we are actually at the other end of the spectrum. We are expensive. But what we do is, because, when I say we are expensive, I don't mean that we are not worth the money. We have very great value for money, but that's still expensive for a startup. So what we do is we have some sort of a arrangement whereby in the initial stages, we invest in the relationship by, giving heavily discounted, fixed fee kind of a arrangement. And what we expect in return is that because we've invested our time and our, time is money in our business, right, in professional services. So because we've invested that, we expect these founders to kind of continue to work with us once they come to a certain stage. So at some level, this sort of a transactional cost is a function of which law firms you go to. In some firms, you'll probably be paying time spent billing because they may not want to work on a non-time spent basis. But we recognized early on that time spent billing is going to be a problem with startups because of this budgeting concerns. They want to have a number and they want to have clarity around it for budgeting.
Now, having said all of that, your firm did announce that as part of your contribution for the COVID pandemic, you are offering $150,000, if I remember the number right, of legal time and the consulting.
Yes.
For startups if they apply for it. How do startups apply for that?
So it's quite simple. You send us an email. The email ID is info@lexygen.law, LEXYGEN.law. So send us an email. First, read our COVID pledge to make sure that you are an eligible service recipient. So pretty much all startups, that are facing some trouble due to the pandemic, or startups that are trying to solve for the pandemic by developing technologies or developing new ways of doing things to solve the pandemic and the related issues. Any of these startups are most welcome. And we have said that while everybody is welcome, if there are healthcare startups which are doing something COVID specific, we'll definitely prioritize them. That's one thing. Even NGOs and not-for-profit organizations, legitimate ones that are committed to which are doing good work in relation to COVID relief, or that are doing related work, are also welcome. Thirdly, there are also some funds being set up, structured funds being set up to raise capital for investing in R&D and related efforts for COVID, related vaccination and new medications and stuff like that. So it could be any of these kind of companies, or it could be just startups which are fallen upon hard times because of the pandemic, and there are quite a few who have. It's been very hard to be an entrepreneur in these times. So
in your experience,
Mm-hmm.
Being in the thick of things with the investment scenario, in the last 6 months with this pandemic and all that, are there any sectors that there is special interest in by investors?
See, I think it's been a bit of a paradoxical situation in India, Nalin, to be honest with you, because on the one hand, you have the pandemic, and it is definitely causing a lot of pain. Undoubtedly, it's causing a lot of pain on the healthcare, and deaths kind of side. It is devastating, and a lot of people are, there's no way of overlooking that. That's a terrible, terrible scenario. And even on the economic side, there are a whole bunch of sectors that have been absolutely gutted, like sectors like hospitality, airlines, restaurants. I mean, restaurants have been absolutely brutalized, and so they need a lot of additional support. But I started by saying it's a paradox, because while one part of the situation is like this, there are startups that are still getting funded, and there are unicorns, new unicorns being made. In 2021 alone, I think we have got some about 10 to 12 new unicorns in just 2021 till now. So there are things to be happy about. There are things to be really sad about. And at the same time, it's very important when you're in an environment like this to maintain a sense of balance and perspective, right? So we fortunately, I must say, have been very fortunate that despite the pandemic, we've been very busy, right? We've been very busy, closing deals. We've been very busy advising on contract renegotiations. We've been very busy advising on, restructuring of labor-related things.
Any particular sectors that investors favored during this time? Was it digital, tech? Or?
I think a lot of digital businesses are getting funded, undoubtedly, because the pandemic has made it even more sexy to be digital for everybody, right? I mean, so if you really look at it, if one were to oversimplify, I would say that anybody who's forced to rely on a physical setup has suffered because of the pandemic, unless, of course, they are in healthcare, etc., where, of course, they are suffering because of, inability to service the demand. That's a different one. But if you look at, be it hotels or restaurants, any of these industries are in terrible shape. And so, therefore, digitization has become even more important. And I'll tell you, in the last 4 months, I've had 6 of my clients who are conventional businesses reach out to me with a specific mandate saying, we want to take your advice in restructuring our business and trying to take a significant portion of it online and to make it, digital. So absolutely, digital is continuing to attract more money, and I think it is going to continue to do so, because digital is actually making the economy survive today. in these times. So sectors like ed tech, ed tech, health tech, consumer businesses that are tech-enabled consumer businesses, and a lot of the B2B businesses are also thriving in these times.
When you said EdTech, I obviously smiled because it's good news for people like me. So we are completely we are completely out of time, but I won't leave you without a final question. I have had the privilege of knowing you for the last few years, and you're very principled. The way you come across, it's very professional. Even if it's a tough message, you have a certain way of giving it, which I think makes you a great advisor and mentor for young startups. And I've seen you in action. That's wonderful. But I want to leave our viewers with the last question. As a person who, like you, who's in a serious field of law, and the whole day it is not something exciting, right? It's not like gaming or something like that. Mm-hmm. How do you relax? What do you do? I'm not going to ask you what Indians will relate to. How do you suck a mango? But how does a lawyer like you relax?
No, I think that's a fantastic question. There couldn't have been a more relevant and important question in these times. I think it's very important for us to find a way to relax, whatever it may be. I personally, though my horrible level of fitness right now doesn't testify to it, I personally like working out. I like playing badminton. That's one thing I miss. Playing badminton is something I miss because of the pandemic, because all the clubs are shut down. But I like, working out at home. But I haven't been able to give proper time for it, mea culpa and all that. I love listening to music. I listen to wide range of music. I like a lot of classic rock. I like some classical. I like also Indian movie music. So I listen to very, very wide range of music. That's a big stress buster for me. Yes, I love spending time with my family and annoying them. Because all day I need to be very serious and giving serious advice to people. So annoying my daughter and my son and my wife is one of my favorite stress busters. And apart from that, I definitely enjoy good wine and good whiskey. That's something which it's also a matter of academic interest for me, apart from just being a stress buster. But yeah, I think I think all of us have our ways of busting stress, and this is something we've been talking about at Lexogen as well. We've had sessions where we have focused on getting people to talk about what they're doing in terms of stress busting, and we've been actually being quite annoying by following up and asking all our people, what have you done this week for stress busting and stuff like that, because it becomes very important when you're just cooped up doing work from home. And as many of us know by now, when talking about it, work from home has meant that it is almost like a 24/7 day. And I'm not saying it in a very proud or bragging way. I'm saying it in a very matter of fact and acknowledging kind of way. So it's very important for us to find the time every day to have a serious stress busting activity. And I hope that every entrepreneur out there who's listening to it doesn't fall behind on this particular. You can fall behind on your numbers, don't fall behind on your health and your stress busting.
Fantastic. The couple of points there. One is, my personal philosophy on stress busting. We've had a few such events after the India Fund Fest that we hold. Also, I noticed that moment you said daughter, son, you quickly corrected yourself and added your spouse. That's politically very correct. And it's a thing that keeps you safe at home.
Absolutely. Thank you. When you're at home, you need to be safe, right? So you have to be very careful with this.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for joining us tonight and sharing insights and part of a personal side of you. Thank you. Have a great night and good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalin. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Roshan and the Transcontinental Times team. And thank you, most importantly, to the audience for listening in. Have a wonderful evening, night, depending on wherever you are. Bye.